I confessed my affair to my husband, yet it was his reaction that shattered me. The words leave my lips like glass breaking in a quiet cathedral. My chest is heaving, my palms slick, but his face, his beautiful, unreadable face, doesn't crack. He doesn't rage, doesn't curse, doesn't even blink, he just smiles. Not the soft smile I fell in love with, not the weary one he wears when he's bone-tired from work. No, this smile is cold, precise, terrifyingly calm. And in that instant, I realize the truth. I don't know the man I married. You'd think the worst part of betrayal is the guilt. The night staring at the ceiling while a stranger's scent still lingers on your skin. The shame burning every time your husband kisses you with trust in his eyes. But no, what haunts me is this. His silence. His terrifying calm while my world collapses at my feet. We'd been married 8 years. 8 years of morning coffee, inside jokes whispered across crowded rooms, his hand finding mine under the dinner table. We built a life, a home, a rhythm that felt unshakable. And then I destroyed it, I should explain. Because maybe you'll hate me, maybe you'll see me as the villain. But nothing feels simple once love and loneliness entwine. It began innocently. That's the part that makes my stomach twist even now. He was a colleague, someone who saw me in a way my husband hadn't in months. Long meetings blurred into late dinners, and I let myself slip into the warmth of attention I thought I no longer deserved at home. One mistake became a pattern, and suddenly I was living a double life. And tonight it all crumbled. I can still feel the weight of the wine glass in my trembling hand when I said it. I need to tell you something. My throat burned as though the words themselves were claws tearing their way out. His eyes, those deep ocean blue eyes, stayed locked on mine, patient, waiting. I've been unfaithful. There it was, the ugliest truth I'd ever spoken. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between us like a chasm. My pulse thundered in my ears, desperate for him to scream, to rage, to feel. But instead, that smile and then his words, low, deliberate, curling into me like smoke. You think you've broken us. But my love, you've only opened the door. The room spun. I couldn't tell if it was fear or desire flooding my veins, but suddenly the air between us was electric, dangerous. I wanted to retreat, to take it back, to beg him to forgive me. Yet something in his voice pinned me in place. Something dark, something intimate. I tried to steady myself, grounding on details. The flicker of candlelight across the mahogany table, the faint scent of cedar and his cologne. But every sense betrayed me, pulling me closer to him even as my heart screamed to run. What do you mean? My voice cracked, a whisper torn in two. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes never leaving mine. Do you think you're the only one who's been tempted? The only one who's crossed a line? My stomach plunged. The glass slipped in my hand, nearly tipping. What are you saying? His laugh was soft, almost cruel. I'm saying, darling, that I've been waiting for this moment. Waiting for you to admit you're human. Because now, his gaze burned straight through me. Now we can finally be honest. A storm raged in me. Terror, shame, and a flicker of something else I didn't want to name. Desire. This wasn't the man I thought I'd married. He wasn't broken by my confession. He was alive in it, as though my betrayal had freed something buried inside him. I should have stood up, walked away, begged forgiveness, but instead I stayed frozen in his gaze, trapped between the ruins of who we were and the terrifying possibility of who we might become. And that was just the beginning. The silence after his words pressed in on me, heavy and suffocating. Honest? That was the word he'd used, as if my confession wasn't a knife driven between us, but some kind of liberation. I stared at him, waiting for anger, for the eruption I thought I deserved. But instead he leaned back in his chair, calm, composed, watching me like I was some puzzle he'd finally solved. You've been waiting for this? My voice trembled, his smile didn't falter. Yes. The word was simple, almost tender, but it rattled me to my bones. The candle between us guttered, throwing shadows across his face. And for the first time I noticed something terrifying. He wasn't shaken. I was. My chest rose and fell too quickly. My throat tightened around every breath. Meanwhile, he looked steady, in control. And beneath the control, I could feel his power. I wanted to demand answers, to accuse him of lying, of cruelty, of playing with me in the most vulnerable moment of my life. But instead I found myself leaning closer, compelled by a magnetism I couldn't explain. "What do you mean? Honest?" His eyes darkened and he tilted his head. "I've known for a long time that something was missing between us. I thought if I ignored it, if I kept us safe in routine, it would vanish. But you—" He paused, his gaze dropping briefly to my lips before returning to my eyes. "You forced me to face it." I swallowed hard. My entire body tingled, a storm of guilt and want colliding inside me. "So what now?" He rose from his chair slowly, deliberately, the way a predator might circle prey it already knows won't run. The scent of him, cedarwood, faint smoke, something distinctly his, wrapped around me. He leaned close enough that his breath warmed the shell of my ear. "Now we start again. Not with illusions, not with lies." My pulse stuttered. His nearness made me dizzy, my thoughts scattering like dry leaves. He wasn't touching me, not yet, but the air between us was charged, humming, unbearable. I whispered, almost desperate, "And if I can't?" Finally, his hand lifted, slow, deliberate, and hovered just above mine on the table. Not touching, not yet, but so close that I could feel the ghost of his warmth. "Then," he murmured, his voice low and intimate, "we'll burn down what's left and build something new from the ashes." A shiver ran through me. His words shouldn't have felt seductive. They should have terrified me, but there was something in his tone, in his promise of destruction and rebirth, that pulled at a part of me I hadn't known existed. I looked at him. Really looked. The man I'd shared a bed with for years, the man I thought I understood completely, was a stranger now. A dangerous, magnetic stranger who somehow knew more about me than I wanted to admit. And in his eyes I saw the unspoken, "I'm not innocent either." The realization hit me like cold water. Had he... I parted my lips, ready to ask, but he shook his head slowly as if reading my mind. "Not tonight," he whispered. "Tonight isn't about the past. It's about what we do with the truth." The air thickened. My skin burned beneath his gaze. Every sound in the room faded until it was just the two of us, locked in a dangerous orbit. I felt my own breath hitch as his hand finally closed over mine. Warmth, firm, claiming. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't anger. It was something else entirely. A vow, a possession, a tether I hadn't expected. I should have pulled away. But I didn't. His thumb brushed once across the back of my hand, barely a touch, but it sent a rush of heat through me that settled low, deep, undeniable. I gasped softly, and his smile widened just enough to make me ache with confusion. "You still love me," he said, not as a question, but as fact. And I hated that he was right. My throat tightened. "Yes," I breathed. He leaned even closer, so close his lips nearly grazed mine, though he didn't close the gap. His restraint was maddening, exquisite. "Torturous, then prove it," he whispered. And before I could ask how, before I could make sense of what he meant, he stepped back, leaving me trembling, burning, desperate for something I couldn't yet name. I stared at him, breathless, my heart pounding against my ribs. And in that moment I knew, whatever came next would change everything. The night didn't end when he stepped back. If anything, that retreat was more dangerous than if he'd kissed me outright. His restraint, his control, left me shaken and raw, as though he had reached inside me and stirred something I'd kept buried. I stood there by the table long after he moved across the room. My hand still tingled where his thumb had brushed. My body still hummed with an energy I couldn't name. He poured himself a drink, slow, deliberate, the ice clinking in the glass. His back was to me, but I could feel him watching in the reflection of the darkened window. His voice, when it came, was low and steady. "Tell me the truth." All of it. My chest constricted. The truth. The ugly, unbearable truth. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles ached. "I don't want to hurt you more," I whispered. He turned then, his expression unreadable, his glass forgotten in his hand. "You already have. Don't insult me by pretending silence will save me now." The words sliced through me. My throat burned. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I forced them back because this moment wasn't about weakness, it was about something deeper. So I confessed. The late nights, the lies about meetings, the stolen hours that had seemed like oxygen when I felt suffocated at home. I told him about how I hated myself after, about how I scrubbed my skin raw in the shower hoping the guilt would wash away. My voice cracked and broke, but I didn't stop. I spilled every detail until I was empty, hollow, trembling. When I finally dared to look at him, I braced for rage, for disgust, for the moment he'd tell me to pack my things and get out. But his eyes, they weren't filled with hate. They were filled with something worse, something that unraveled me completely. Compassion. He set the glass down, crossed the room in 3 measured steps, and stood so close I could feel the warmth radiating off him. His hand came up, not rough, not punishing, but gentle, cupping my face like I was fragile glass. "You were lonely," he murmured, his thumb brushing a tear I hadn't realized had escaped. And I didn't see it. My knees nearly gave out. His kindness was unbearable, cutting deeper than any anger could have. Don't make excuses for me," I begged, my voice shaking. "I betrayed you." His eyes locked onto mine, unwavering. "You betrayed the marriage, not me. Not the man you still love. That's different." I couldn't breathe. My lips parted, trembling, and before I knew what I was doing, the words tumbled out. "I love you. I always have. Even when I didn't act like it." There, my own confession, raw and desperate. His thumb lingered on my cheek, his other hand sliding to the nape of my neck, firm, steady, grounding me. "Then show me," he whispered, echoing his earlier challenge. I don't know who moved first, maybe it was him, maybe it was me, but suddenly his mouth was on mine. Not tender, not brutal, something in between. Hungry but controlled. My heart leapt to my throat as I melted into him, the familiar taste of him flooding me, anchoring me, burning me alive. I kissed him like a drowning woman clinging to air. His hands framed my face, then slid down my shoulders, holding me as if he needed proof that I was still his, that despite everything we were still tethered. The kiss deepened, my body pressed flush against his, and for a moment time didn't exist. There was no betrayal, no guilt, no past, only this fire. This confession written not in words but in touch. When he finally pulled back, I gasped, my lips swollen, my breath ragged. "I don't forgive you," he said, voice low, almost trembling. "Not yet." Tears welled again, and I nodded, swallowing hard. "I wouldn't forgive me either." But then his hand tightened at the back of my neck, pulling me close until our foreheads touched. His breath mingled with mine, warm and ragged. "But I still want you," he whispered. The words broke me open. I clutched his shirt, burying my face in his chest as sobs shook me. Sobs not of guilt, but of release. Because despite everything, despite the ruin I'd caused, he wanted me. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't repair. But it was something. A beginning. And as he held me, silent, his words echoed through me. "I still want you." They clung to my skin, sank into my bones, a promise and a warning all at once. I couldn't stop trembling, pressed against him. His heartbeat strong and steady beneath my ear while mine raced wildly, untamed. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, his hand warm against the back of my neck, his breath stirring my hair. I thought he would let me go, pull back into that frightening calm he'd wrapped himself in. But instead his grip tightened, and then suddenly he pulled me back just enough to look at me. His eyes burned, stormy and alive, no longer cold, no longer unreadable. "Do you know what it did to me?" His voice was low, trembling with force. "Knowing you gave yourself to someone else?" My throat closed. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came. Shame flooded me, hot and suffocating. He leaned closer, so close his forehead almost touched mine, his gaze searing me. It destroyed me. It made me hate you. Hate myself. Hate what we'd become. Tears slid down my cheeks. My lips parted, but again, silence. And then his tone shifted, softer, darker. But it also made me realize something. I searched his face, desperate, terrified. "What?" His hand slid from my neck down to my waist, gripping me, pulling me flush against him. I gasped, my body betraying me, igniting at his touch. "That I want you more than I've ever admitted. That no one else could ever have you the way I do. That even broken, you're still mine." The words were a claim, a vow, a brand against my skin. My knees weakened and I clutched his shirt like a lifeline. I should have been furious. I should have pushed him away for daring to say mine after everything I'd done. But the truth was, I wanted to be his. I always had. I lifted my head, my lips trembling, and whispered, "Then take me back." Something in his eyes snapped. The restraint he'd worn all night shattered like glass. He kissed me again, harder this time, consuming, desperate. His hands roamed my body with the kind of certainty that comes only from years of knowing every inch, every response. I melted and burned all at once. My heart thundered, my breath hitched, my body arching toward his as if it had been waiting all these months, years for this very moment. He pressed me back against the wall, his mouth moving down to my throat, his breath hot against my skin. I gasped, fingers tangling in his hair, a whimper escaping my lips before I could stop it. "You're mine," he growled softly against my neck. The words weren't cruel. They weren't possessive in the way that trapped me. They were anchoring, fierce. They tethered me to him in a way I hadn't felt in years. I clung to him, my body trembling, my heart breaking and mending in the same breath. "Yes," I whispered, voice ragged. "I'm yours, always." He pulled back just enough to look into my eyes, his chest heaving, his lips swollen. His gaze searched mine, not for lies, not for excuses, but for surrender. For truth, and I gave it to him. Every inch of me, every tear, every shaky breath. I was lost, I whispered. But I never stopped being yours. His jaw clenched, his thumb brushing across my swollen lips. "Then we fight. We fight to make this ours again." The words weren't soft, weren't romantic in the way novels promised. They were raw, jagged, real. And somehow they were more beautiful than any vow we'd spoken before. We kissed again. Hungry, desperate, alive. It wasn't about forgetting. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about survival. About clinging to what still burned between us when everything else had turned to ash. When he finally tore his lips from mine, both of us gasping, trembling, he rested his forehead against mine. "This isn't the end," he whispered. "It's the breaking point. What we do next decides everything." And deep down I knew he was right, because love isn't destroyed by one betrayal. It's destroyed by what happens after. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure whether we'd save each other or burn together. His words echoed inside me. This isn't the end. It's the breaking point. We stood there, pressed against one another, hearts racing in unison as though the walls of the house themselves were listening to our silence. The storm outside had rolled in unnoticed, rain streaking against the windows, thunder rumbling like the pulse of the earth. Inside, everything was heat and trembling need. I thought we would keep kissing, keep losing ourselves in the fire we'd unleashed. But instead he pulled back, his hand still firm at my waist, his eyes blazing with a mixture of love, anger, and something that looked frighteningly like hope. "Tell me," he said, voice low, roughened with emotion. "Tell me you want me, not out of guilt, not out of fear of losing me. Tell me you want me." The challenge burned between us. My lips parted, my breath caught in my throat. And for the first time I didn't hesitate. "I want you," I whispered, the words breaking out of me like a prayer, my fingers fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. "I've always wanted you, even when I tried to convince myself I didn't, even when I made the worst mistake of my life." His chest rose sharply, his grip tightening, and then his lips were on mine again. But this kiss was different. Not anger, not punishment. It was raw, unguarded, searing with everything we'd left unsaid for years. I melted into him, every inch of me pressing against him, every barrier collapsing. He lifted me as though I weighed nothing, carrying me toward the couch, and I clung to him, trembling, overwhelmed. When he set me down, his forehead rested against mine, our breaths colliding. "If we do this," he murmured, "we start over. No secrets, no masks, only truth." Tears slid down my cheeks, and I nodded, my voice shaking but steady. "Then start with me now, all of me. Every part." Something shifted in him then. His hands, once firm with restraint, softened. His touch became reverent, like he was memorizing me anew. He kissed the tears from my cheeks, his lips brushing over the salt of my guilt, my confession, my plea. I kissed him back, fiercely, desperately, pouring every ounce of love and regret and need into it. The storm outside raged louder, but inside it was only us, tangled in heat and forgiveness, breaking and mending in the same breath. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt alive. He pulled back, his gaze fierce, unrelenting. "Say it again," he demanded softly. "I want you." My voice didn't shake this time. It was steady, sure, a vow. A smile, real, raw, aching, broke across his face. And then his mouth claimed mine once more, sealing everything between us in fire and breath and trembling hands. What followed wasn't about erasing the past. It wasn't about pretending the betrayal hadn't happened. It was about choosing in that moment to fight for something worth saving. Hours blurred into each other. Touch, breath, whispers of names spoken like confessions. The world narrowed to just us, two souls clawing our way back to one another through fire and storm. And when finally, the intensity ebbed into stillness, I lay curled against him, my head on his chest, his hand resting protectively at my hip. The storm had passed outside, leaving the world washed clean. Inside it felt the same. I whispered into the quiet, "Will you ever forgive me?" He was silent for a long time, his chest rising and falling beneath my cheek. I thought maybe he'd drifted to sleep. But then his fingers traced slow, steady circles against my skin, and his voice came low, raw. "I don't know if I'll ever forget, but forgiveness," he exhaled long and shaky. "Forgiveness we can build. Together." I closed my eyes, tears slipping silently down my face. But this time they weren't from despair. They were from relief, from love, from the fragile hope he'd placed back into my hands. We were shattered, yes, but we were still us. I kissed his chest softly, pressing my lips to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Then let's build." He tightened his arm around me, pulling me closer, anchoring me against him. And in that moment I knew we weren't healed. We weren't whole, but we were alive together and willing to fight, and sometimes that's enough to begin again.